And I think that the senator from Alexandria's argument as it relates to the fact that we stand here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where Jefferson essentially lined out what religious liberty meant for a commonwealth before the nation had such a rule, is a pertinent point. But what nobody's done is read what was the logical offshoot of Jefferson's opinions on religious freedom. And those evolved into what became the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which I will, if you'll humor me, read. Congress, meaning a legislative body, shall make no law respecting establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free practice thereof. I've done a lot of reading, Mr. President, on the curse of Ham, which was used by people to justify a slave trade. And I've also done a lot of reading on the refutation that is hundreds of years old of the allegation that the curse of Ham was used by any legitimate religious official to justify such a thing. Martin Luther himself refuted the assertion that the curse of Ham made slavery okay. William Wilberforce fought and risked essentially his honor. Abraham Lincoln dismissed on its face any argument based on the curse of Ham, and all three were Christians, one of whom was the father of a prominent branch of the entire faith. In fact, I'll digress for a moment and say there is but one main religion in the world right now that has entire portions of its text devoted to how one should treat the slaves that they're allowed to own. Back on topic. And it isn't Christianity that does that. This is not about stopping people from marrying each other. This is about stopping people from forcing others to marry them. When we talk about the word accommodation used in this bill, and I would have submitted to the senator from Grayson, but he was under questioning, if we pull that word out, will you support it? I'm sincere. Mr. President, the word accommodation alone has no force of law. The word public accommodation has a great deal of force of law, because that's what happened when we had massive resistance and racism enshrined in not just, people's recesses, their minds, but restaurant counters and hotels, right? That's a public accommodation. The word public's not here. So what we have then is truly state-mandated ideological coercion. We have a consensus of public sentiment that would be enforced by rule of law. And we have a concerted effort to stifle the voice of dissent sponsored by the state. Candidly, maybe I'll get myself in trouble. What on earth, if we want to talk about things like Loving versus Virginia, and some horrific prejudicial practices in the past, is the state doing involved in the arena of marriage anyway? Because what's going on here that the senator from Grayson seeks to address is we're about to get to a point where indeed the act of performing a marriage, not getting married, becomes a public accommodation, and we tell the Catholic priest or the Baptist minister or the Muslim imam or the Orthodox Jewish rabbi, you must marry these people because the performance of this ritual is a public accommodation. And then Jefferson's vision for religious liberty is dead. Then I'm not standing up here to stop two people from getting married regardless of their gender. That fight's fought. I'm standing up here to say, when we start telling what churches who they have to marry, we've destroyed the freedom to worship and exercise religion as we choose. I'll close with this, and I'll be redundant. Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. When we start making priests and Baptist ministers and Muslim imams and Jewish Orthodox rabbis marry people that they don't believe in their heart they should based on their doctrinal scripture, we have destroyed true religious liberty in America. Thank you.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from Henrico.
Will the senator from Buckingham yield for a colloquy?
Would the senator from Buckingham yield for a question? He yields, Senator.
Mr. President, I was interested to hear him talk about how the curse of Ham had been refuted by, really in ancient times compared to where we are now, by a number of religious scholars. Does that mean that the people who did not believe like the religious scholars believed did not have a deeply held religious belief?
Senator from Buckingham.
Mr. President, I would say this. It has been used, I think, candidly, to attack my faith, to say your faith justified slavery. The people who philosophized on what I believe never used that. Did some people, Mr. President? Yes, they did. I disclaim them, and I'm ashamed of them, and they don't speak for me or my faith. And they didn't speak for Martin Luther, and they didn't speak for William Wilberforce, and they didn't speak for Abraham Lincoln.
Further question, Mr. President.
Yield for an additional question.
I would ask the senator to listen to my question and answer my question, and I'll try to do a better job of articulating my question. Does the mere fact that there were some religious scholars many, many years ago who thought that the curse of Ham was a crock take away from the fact that there were people there during that time that held a deeply religious conviction that it was not a crock, that it was justification for slavery? Does that affect the quality or the depth of those people who believe that, contrary to Martin Luther?
The senator from Buckingham.
Mr. President, I never thought I would mutter these three words in sequence on the floor, but I would ask the question rhetorically, does the fact that Malik Zulu Shabazz feels that one race is better than the other take away from the fact that you don't? It's kind of like asking, have you stopped beating your wife? Yeah, there were racists who used one scripture from the Bible to justify abhorrent behavior, but that ain't what's going on here. That's not what's going on here. So with all due respect, I understand where you're coming from, and it was used, and I would concede that. I would tell you that it's an attack. It's offensive to me to suggest that I might believe that because I adhere to the same faith of somebody who some number of years ago used that to justify in a horrible wrong. Sorry, I have my voice back. Now I've lost it again.
Thank you. And the senior senator.
This is like pulling teeth. I apologize for speaking to the measure again, Mr. President, and after this I'll just sit down and vote. The senator from Buckingham and I are not able to communicate right now. I'm not asking the questions in the right manner, and perhaps he's not hearing them in the right manner. My point was simply this. There was a time when the curse of Ham was an accepted religious practice or belief, and that was used to justify discrimination. Things change over time, and I don't mean to suggest that anybody in this chamber believes that today. My point is this. The senator from Buckingham and the senator from Grayson have talked about the marriage ceremony. Nobody disagrees with the notion that the marriage ceremony should be performed by someone who's willing to perform it. But this bill goes beyond that. There's an or in there. And the or talks about, and after the or follows the words facilities, accommodations, and a whole host of other things. And that puts it in the disjunctive. It's not like you're saying connecting the marriage with the facilities or the accommodations through the use of the word and. You're doing it through the use of the word or, which means you're talking about something other than the marriage ceremony itself. And when you start getting into accommodations, I would suggest that to the senator from Buckingham that it's not qualified by the word private. It's not qualified by the word public. It just says accommodations. And I suggest to you that makes it unconstitutional because there's another clause that we're supposed to honor in our Constitution called interstate commerce. And it's been under the interstate commerce clause that many discriminatory practices were struck down. You can be as discriminatory as you want as long as you're not in interstate commerce. This bill brings things into interstate commerce, facilities, accommodations. Because, again, it's not the conjunctive, it's the disjunctive.
If you look up public accommodation definition, you get a legal definition from the Supreme Court. If you look up accommodation definition, you get Webster's Dictionary. The word public makes a huge difference. It goes directly to the senator from Fairfax's question, and that is you may not refuse, and it's the law, and it should be, at a restaurant or a hotel or whatever. But there's no legal definition on the first page of an accommodation. The word public is all the difference in the world.